Hello, ladies. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the first event in a series with Tokeativity and Club Kindness called Bridges. These are conversations about race, equity, and inclusion. My name is Mskindness B. Ramirez, and I will be your guide through this journey. I am joined by my co-hosts, Lisa Snyder and Samantha Montanaro of Tokeativity, and I want to welcome them to say hello.
Thank you, Miss Kindness. Hello, everyone. We're so happy that you have joined us here today for this very important event about race, equity, and inclusion. We're hosting this event today because in women's cannabis communities like Tokeativity and others, we've witnessed a growing need for tools and skill set development when difficult conversations or conflicts surrounding race, equity, and inclusion arise.
If we want to end systematic racism and create equal opportunity for marginalized communities in future generations, we as women in plant medicine need to really take a look at the ways we're working through conflict in our own lives. Patriarchal ways of responding to offensive circumstances often include all or nothing thinking, stonewalling, jumping to conclusions, and social media-driven cancel culture.
If we truly want to encourage the matriarchal balance, we have to look within and move from a grounded space in our own bodies. Listening, asking more questions, breathing, taking breaks, giving it another try. We have to believe that all humans have the ability to grow, learn, evolve, and change, which we most certainly have the ability to do. We've evolved to get here today. Thank you for being here. We're so excited to learn today and engage with all of you in the sesh rooms after the main stage panel. A special thank you to Miss Kindness, you beautiful, glorious human being, just a ray of sunshine. And someone who's just willing to jump both feet in to challenging things to get to the other side. And thanks to our panelists for making space for this important event. We're just honored to have you here.
A little bit of
housekeeping.
Oh,
no, go ahead. Yeah.
Just want to do a little bit of housekeeping here.
I like this.
So as far as the platform goes, before we hand it over, we just want to give you a little tutorial here. On the left-hand side, you can see a navigation bar. At the top is the reception area where you can find the schedule for today's event, as well as our partners and information about them. Below that is the main stage and sessions. Around 5 o'clock or right after we're done here, we're going to be moving over into our live Q&A, which you can join us there. We do not have speed networking today or the expo floor open, but we would love for you to join us for the Toking Hour, which is on October 13th, to see the amazing interactive capabilities of our platform. And today's session is, you'll see a chat box, which I see many of you have already been communicating with one another, and we encourage you to continue to do that. And one last thing here, if you are looking for somebody inside this event, there's a people tab and you can click on people and look to see who is here today.
It's important to us today that you feel comfortable and welcome for this really important discussion. So if at any time you're not feeling that way, please go to the people's tab and find me or Lisa. We're going to be behind the scenes this event. We can help you navigate from there. We encourage you all to sit back, take a break, or take a puff and get ready to have some knowledge dropped about opportunity, inclusion, and tokenism. Thank you, Miss Kindness.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam and Lisa. I appreciate you two so much. And you know that when we started having conversations about the power that we have to really heal ourselves as women in cannabis, we started thinking about that division. And, you hit it on the head, Sam, with the intention behind this event and how we just had a beautiful conversation about how we need to have more conversations like this, right? And really find ways to make bridges that can, that are strong and can sustain the smoke. And these are the times, because there's been this sort of national reemergence or reckoning that we need to acknowledge the racial disparities in our country and globally. And as people of color and women of color, we've obviously known that since the beginning of our existence. So I'm really grateful to have allies like you and Lisa to work with and partner with to create something that we hope to really impact real change. Our goal with this event, as we discussed, is to really create a framework or some tools that other bridge makers and women in cannabis can use to help collaborate, right, and heal our communities. So I'm excited to be doing alongside you all. I'm looking forward to future panels. Today's is amazing. These are three women I consider friends. Yeah, I can't say more. So here I am on the screen all by myself. Welcome again. My name is Mskindness Ramirez. I am the CEO of Club Kindness. We are a nonprofit organization. We teach new consumers how to use cannabis and how to integrate it into what we call cannabis inclusive wellness lifestyle. I am a professional educator, a mother, a wife, a mentor, and an advocate for so many, and especially those mothers who need cannabis for a healthy lifestyle. I am friends with Sam and Lisa, and excited to be here on this experience. So this is Bridges, and it is an event series where we'll be having conversations about race, equity, and inclusion. Today's topic is tokenism, inclusivity, and opportunity. And I am joined by three amazing women who I do consider friends and sisters in the space. I do want us to just take a minute, though, before we go into this conversation. I introduce the panelists to really get grounded where we are, get comfortable in our seats, and focus on our own breath. These conversations around race, equity, and inclusion can be stimulating. They can cause re-stimulation. They can, some of the words that we're going to talk about may produce triggers. I think it's really, really important that we honor those feelings in our body and recognize what the signs to look for. So think about how comfortable you are around topics like race and equity, and identify some of those markers that might come up, like sweaty hands, nervousness, as we get into this dialogue. I think those opportunities are great for then leaning into the experience, asking yourself about the discomfort, and then turning it into a question that you can ask, and then put it in the chat box. So if you put it in the chat box during the first hour, I'll take note of it and record it for going into Q&A. And if you want to save it for Q&A, then do so. And during Q&A, you are welcome to come on camera and ask your question direct to the panelists and experts as well. So without further ado, let's just get into it. I'm going to have our panelists join me. I will do a quick intro and then let them tell you about themselves, and we'll get right into it. Let's all take a deep breath as they begin to join us on the screen together. Inhale. Exhale. I'm excited. There's 2 out of 3. So right now I am joined by Dr. Tiffany Bowden and Chef Andrea Drummer. Thank you, ladies, and welcome to the stage. Thank you for joining me for this crucial conversation.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this experience. It's so necessary. I believe that we have, I think everyone, especially in this moment of being still, is trying to find opportunities to bridge these gaps. So hopefully we make some headway today.
Let's do that. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And Tiffany Watkins has joined us on the screen. I'm going to give you a minute to get settled in. And Dr. Bowden, if you will just introduce yourself. And
Yes, hi guys. My name is Dr. Tiffany Bowden. I'm a diversity consultant and cannabis consultant as well. I've been a TEDx speaker. I've been in an inclusion space for probably about 20 years. I'm very happy to be here, to be able to share in this experience with you. And thank you all for coming out to do this work together.
Yes, yes. Tell us more about yourself, Chef Drummer. I know you had just said thank you, and then but tell us more about yourself. Let the people know who you are. So as we're waiting on Tiffany Watkins, we can understand you better.
I'm just a lowly cook, that's all.
Changes lives.
My name is Andrea Drummer. I've been in the cannabis space since 2012, first founding a co-founder of Elevation VIP, which is a cooperative that specializes in elevated cuisine. Moving forward, I also initiated SED, which is Cannabis Entrepreneurial Dialogues, which was set forth to kind of educate consumers, entrepreneurs about the different things that are going on in the cannabis space. Essentially the TED Talks of cannabis. And what I'm probably most, I don't know, but I was also on 2 Netflix series, Chelsea Does, and also Cooking on High. And more notably, one of the co-owners and executive chef of the original Cannabis Cafe in West Hollywood.
Yes.
Hi, guys.
Thank you.
Guys.
If there was like, if this was Token Tuesdays, there would be this like applause machine right now, like, yeah. I'm so grateful, and I'm so proud to have you both on the show. And you know, I want to first ask you, are you right now feeling at all tokenized?
Oh, absolutely not. You know, I'm very grateful to be here and happy to contribute into the space for sure.
In this particular space, absolutely not. And moreover, in my life outside of this screen right now, no. And that's by choice.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. You know what? That takes us right into the discussion. That's a perfect transition. I know Tiffany Watkins will join in, and she'll just come into the convo when she comes on screen. But let's get into it, because I know women are ready and anxious. I want to talk about this word tokenism, tokenization first, right? I think before we can get into any discussions around the nuances, we have to kind of settle on a definition. And so I'll read what Webster says. It's the practice of doing something, such as hiring a person who belongs to a minority group, only to prevent criticism and give the appearance that people are being treated fairly. Now, that is Webster's definition. So if we start by defining it for ourselves, I'd like to know how each of you define it and really recognize it. Maybe you can elevate that definition for us.
Absolutely. I think I've never heard it defined as such, but that's absolutely how I would describe it. It's just more or less an inauthentic way of being inclusive, only because it suits a quota, or it makes you look like you're doing the will of good. So I would wholeheartedly agree. I know there are absolutely some nuances in that, and we have personal experiences that may lend to what that looks like and what it feels like, absolutely. But that defines it for me, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Chef Andrea here, and I would add to that it ultimately it's about a practice of merely being symbolic in terms of your representation. Where the site of injury often is at the site of intention. You know, when tokenism occurs, it's rarely on accident.
Right.
It's mostly about only wanting to create a benefit for oneself. There's not necessarily a thorough, act of creating win-win situation for all around. So when those intentions are mismanaged or when they're only in one direction, that's usually where you would see that tokenism appear. But effectively, it's a symbolic effort for appearing diverse.
So how can we recognize it?
So go ahead, Chef.
I was asking, who is the we? Define who is the
the one, the minority, the ones being tokenized. And actually, how is it recognizable? So a collective we. How would you know?
To be honest, my perspective is this. I think as a Black person, and specifically as a Black woman, I think we arise every day knowing that we have to participate in some way, shape, or form in racism. And we have to define what that looks like for ourselves, and how much of ourselves we're willing to give up or negotiate, whereby maintaining our own integrity, or sometimes not. So I think as a Black person, how do you recognize it? How do you not is more so the question for me, is how do you not recognize it? Just based on the landscape and the foundation of this country, this great country.
I think that another way that you recognize it, if you are finding yourself constantly on the short end of the stick, if you are providing a significant amount of benefit to an organization, to an event, to some kind of practice, and you end up left holding the bag, or taking on more labor, or not being compensated, or these types of things. Those are some of the telltale signs for when you are being tokenized. Now, sometimes you might be getting compensated from your frame of reference well, and you are still being tokenized. So that happens, for example, in the social equity movement within cannabis, in that you have a lot of corruption where you'll have, for example, white investors who will come in, and then they may pay people who have not had a lot of means historically, and they might say, I'll give you $50,000 or $100,000 to just throw your name on this paper, not say anything.
And that feels like a whole lot to a person who's never even seen $5,000.
Exactly. And then you're turning up, multi-million-dollar opportunities potentially. And so that in itself also can be tokenism, because what they're doing is they're wanting to show to the state a kind of representation. And in fact, that person has nothing to do with an operation. So these things can be kind of complicated. It's not necessarily like textbook one way that it can show up. But really, I always look to that site of intention and just checking in on those win-wins in symbolism as well as substance.
Well, that's
did it ever surprise, again, I think that we just as Black people in this country, we have to actively participate in these exchanges. And how much of yourself are you willing to invest, and how much of sometimes your soul are you willing to compromise, right? So for me, it's never a surprise. I have to make a conscious decision of what I want to share of me. And sometimes you think the intention is not as bad, or maybe or better than, and then may come to realize that that is not the case, and have to make another decision for yourself. I've had that experience, but again, are we ever really surprised that that is the case? I think in some regard, are we not always tokenized?
Well, it makes me think about, being the first of something, right? So essentially, if you are the minority and then you become the first of it, there's this area that only the individual can figure out if they were the token or just the first, and what does that look like? But you said something earlier, Dr. Bowden, and welcome, Tiffany Watkins. I will turn to you in just a moment and have you introduce yourself and bring you right into the conversation. Thank you for joining us for Bridges. You talked about social equity, and it made me think about these systems, right? So this system created a space for tokenization because it said, while we wanted to be inclusive, that was the intention, it inadvertently created an opportunity for exploitation. And that's left to the individual, right?
Yeah, and I think that, just to amplify, my sister here, Andrea, she, gave a really powerful nugget here in understanding that you almost come to expect it. And so there is an element of accountability that we need to hold in terms of our learning how to navigate that a bit and taking some of that energy into our own hands. In fact, it's no surprise that she's been able to, achieve the things that she's been able to achieve with this kind of mindset in my space also. That is how I've had to navigate. I've worked in predominantly white environments my whole life, in corporate spaces. And what would often happen is that, I would be brought on as a part of different kinds of diversity internship programs and what have you. And then they want to put me on, say, the Black Project. And I'm like, I can do that, but I'm also really great at doing X, Y, and Z. Or I might come in and I'm doing said, kind of generic, whatever type of project, but then they want me to take on the additional labor that is the cultural stuff, and they assume
building a diversity program.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, you know what? Fine. I see what we're doing here. I'm going to go ahead and document everything and then come review. By the way, I also did all of these things above and beyond my actual job description. So I need to change the title and a raise that actually reflects the labor.
So you are talking, I picked the right panel because these are three women with an extreme amount of personal power. So I do want to say that work with self has to happen first, right? Where we access that personal power and you ask for the things that you deserve. But you're talking about this strategic navigation that we as Black women just are born with the skill of doing. And I would like to see the day where we don't have to do that, right? That is the goal. But it's innate right now. I want to bring you into the conversation, Tiffany Watkins. Please, everyone, welcome. Join me in welcoming her to the main stage. And please introduce yourself and tell us who you are and why you are here today for this conversation.
Certainly. Thank you, Ms. Kindness. Thank you to the other panelists for waiting, patiently by while I was having all sorts of worldly issues. I am Tiffany Watkins. I am the founder of Vanguard magazine, which is a platform for women in the cannabis space. I've been in cannabis for almost 3 total decades, and through activism and everything in between then and now, pretty much. And so I felt it was my duty to keep pushing forward on equality in cannabis, because we used to have a certain amount of it in our communities as we were somewhat segregated and somewhat pushed into these categories for ourselves. And now bringing it into industry, I see that segregation has no place. And what's happening is we're having a scale that is disproportionately tipped towards white America, and which is typical for our industries here, if I speak bluntly. And we just don't need to see that happen again for persons of color or for women. So I'm doing my part in trying to bridge that gap between the sexes and between the races. I have my original background is in technology. Oddly enough, since I had so many tech issues getting in here. So, I think that what I bring to this conversation is the idea that even when we feel we are equal, there is always something there in the balance that leans us towards inequality. And so I'm happy to have this conversation with not only with you ladies, but with all that have come to listen and hopefully ask questions, because building a bridge, Mskindness idea of building a bridge is so necessary. If for nothing else, just to have both sides feel comfortable and asking the hard questions that need the true answers. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. I'm excited to hear. I'm looking forward to the question and answer portion, but I know we're going to get into some good stuff. You were already talking, ladies, about our experience collectively on this panel. I know each of you. I know how you all grew up, and we have been the first of many. I know that each of us have been the only Black woman at an executive table many times. I know that each of us have been the only Black student in a setting many times. I know that about all of us. And so when I think about the communities that we grew up in where we were the minority, I'm always curious about how it's impacted us in our adult choices. And you all already kind of touched on this. So I'd like you to describe a situation, and I mean, in whatever order, we can just go clockwise, where you were the minority, but you felt included. And how was that different than being tokenized?
I could describe a situation. I worked for an amazing company in New York called Rockcore. And it was not only was it very diverse, but we talked openly about that diversity and what it meant to the company. And so I was a coordinator. I was one of the kind of leadership teams. So I would sit in these meetings and we would talk about, the hiring process, staff that we wanted to bring on and what that looked like in the communities that we were going into, and what that hiring process looked like and who we were hiring for that particular team to go in those specific communities. And it wasn't, you didn't feel tokenized. It's just like, this is impactful for that community and they need to see a certain face show up in that community for them. And that needed to be visible on the team from the start. And so it was very open conversation and dialogue about that. And it wasn't a kind of a secretive thing that I'm going to manipulate the situation to benefit.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like the intention was clear. There's that word again. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful. Dr. Bowden?
Yeah, I would say, this has happened to me actually recently, because I work as an entrepreneur, but I also work in corporate America as well. So it's just this week, I was just sitting in a meeting, and I am in a predominantly white company, of course, but in this particular meeting, there were, more people of color who were present. And these people have never met with me before or anything. And it's the simplest kinds of things that make you feel included and not tokenized. The question of, what do you think, Tiffany? Or what do you, and they say, what do you think, Dr. Bowden? It's like, oh, so you actually addressed me as Dr. Bowden and you asked me what I think. You acknowledge that I do think. And then, when I expressed what I thought, they actually made changes on the spot based off of what I thought. These are things that sound very simple.
I just want to say that I have to interject because I'm almost in tears over here thinking about you actually describing being treated as a human. And I want to make sure that is real clear. I need to step in here and I need to make sure everybody watching and listening is hearing that she's not describing a privilege. She's describing being treated as a human at a table and being addressed by the name and credential that she earned. And just being asked what you think. And I'm sorry, I needed to just.
I mean, when the president is calling women, monsters and communists, it doesn't escape us here that is actually an acknowledgement. It shouldn't be, but it's actually like that's a thing. It should just be the norm.
Absolutely. And, and for me, just sitting there, it was actually a very emotional moment for me because I've worked in, these kinds of spaces all my life. I mean, I've been in predominantly white environments all my life. And it was just like an aha moment of like, wow, I don't think I've ever been seen in this boardroom before. Like, it's just really weird from a standpoint of, you've experienced so much professional life and to like have that moment where you're like, wow, like this is actually confirmation and proof positive of all the things that I have never been able to, quantify, hold, or be able to like actually touch, but you feel very deeply, it's there, but it's hard to call a thing, especially when you're being gaslighted all the time. Made to believe that it's not there. But then when you get the contrast, you're like, oh, it absolutely was there.
I'm not crazy. Yes.
I'm not crazy, So that just actually happened recently. So for me to go out there with so much professional life and for that to have only just happened this week, that's the first time that's actually happened in a predominantly white setting, a predominantly white environment. That's actually that was really telling for me.
Wow.
That's powerful. Yeah, it does beg another question for me. I'm going to ask after. I want to hear Tiffany Watkins.
Certainly. I think
I'm going to remember to come back to that.
My situation might be slightly different. Growing up in a predominantly white environment, and I'm being generous by saying predominantly white. I was typically in my school one of maybe two Black faces that were there. And we had no differences. I was always included. I was always part of the crowd. We didn't make these differences. And oddly enough, it's funny because we're talking about such young people. This is through, elementary school all the way through high school. In high school, I was one of three Blacks. I went to a very small high school. It was private and all girl. And there were only two other Black girls besides myself. And again, always felt included. Never any problems with dances, nothing like that. Went to college right out of high school. That was my first time of ever feeling that I was different. My parents were not without telling my culture and telling me about history and I understood, but somehow I was able to, and if I'm transparent here, I was able to separate myself from that history because I was treated so I was so So when I got to college and all of a sudden there's people from all walks of life in all parts of the country, I was hit with the first idea that, I'm not only different than the people who are not Black, I'm somewhat different than some of the Blacks that I'm meeting. And there was a sort of that come to the universe moment where racism became a true part of my life, and it was painful and it was deafening. So my experience is almost on the opposite end, where I felt included only to find out that the world does not include us equally. And I went to college the first time when I was 17, so I was very young, and having to learn this hard lesson that I knew already existed because I had been prepared for this lesson. But it's one thing to see it on paper, it's one thing to read about it in the history book, and it's one thing to listen to your parents, and then it's another thing to walk a campus and suddenly feel like you just don't belong. And so, but up until that point, like I said, I had always felt so included. So I know that there are two halves, and I built my adult life on understanding that there are two halves. Those that feel as if color truly doesn't matter, and then those that say, I don't see color. Because there's a stark difference between those two statements and the sentiment behind those two statements, So that is, it's always sad. I always feel it in my heart when I remember the first times that I didn't feel included, because up until that point, it seemed like we were smooth. And then it gives me a little bit of hope, because I know that youth is truly the answer of understanding, because we create those differences for our youth to kind of abide by, not the other way around. So
yeah, I find it interesting that like racism is almost such like a monolithic experience, but being a person is not at all. Like we have such different experiences that how could you just make a decision just based on a demographic of people? It's interesting.
Yeah, very true. And Tiffany, Watkins, you and I share that background. We've had that talk that I grew up where I was the only Black kid in my elementary school, and then one of like 10 in middle school. And that impact and how it turned me instantly into someone who knew how to code switch very well. So I didn't have the same experience in that I didn't have situations with racism. They were very clear to me. I lived in like what I call microaggression city. There was always some teacher saying how exceptional I was, or there was always somebody saying, hey, I'm watching you when we went into the store in the same neighborhood with my white friends. But I learned how to navigate very quickly. And so code switching became a priceless skill for me. And so, yeah, I know we share that sentiment. And I think about how I've now learned to use that skill in the boardroom, and how it's allowed me to adapt to scenarios where I wasn't treated as human. And so coming back to what you were talking about, Dr. Bowden, and that how powerful that is to recognize at this stage in our lives, in our professional careers, as women, as educated women, that, oh my goodness, I can't believe all this time I was tolerating this, I wasn't being seen, and this is what it feels like. So it's like a bittersweet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say something also too about the code switching. I'll say that, one of the most liberating and powerful things that I have done has been to sit that down and just to show up as who I am. That has been one of the most liberating things that I've done, because, when you grow up in these predominantly white environments, you're frequently being dictated who you are, who your people are. You almost get socialized about yourself and your people through white lenses, the same way that white people do. And that can create all kinds of internalized challenges. I remember, literally being in elementary school, and, my favorite music artists were like Alanis Morissette and whatever, these different groups. I liked country music, whatever, but I wasn't allowed to like these things because of, what I was supposed to like. And the white kids at school would constantly ask me the lyrics for, Tupac songs or Too Short or whatever. And I'm like, I don't actually know. Let me go look that up. And now I'm having to take on the labor of not having my black card revoked, trying to show up and be the cool person over here in the white spaces. And I'm not actually allowed to just simply exist and like what I like. And then that turns into, when I had afro or whatever, I would press my hair before going into interviews. I messed around, damaged my hair fell out trying to just be acceptable for an interview. So many different things, or how I might speak on the phone, whatever. And it just got something. I was like, I'm tired. I'm just going to actually just be professional. And I can be professional and myself and be cultural. My blackness is not unprofessional. I'm just going to show up, and I'm going to be exactly who I am, in all dimensions. There's different levels and of, okay, you can get a casual, Tiffany, you can get Dr. Bowden, you can get all kinds of ranges of me, but you're going to get
who I am, present moment awareness. Okay, that's what we are talking about. Yes, and
understand how much privilege that is to be able to show up and just be you. Show up and not have to worry about, well, did I have my hair right? Did I have my clothes right? Because I need to go into, a store, or I need to go just something casual. We're talking, you're taking it away from the boardroom. Just being casually you is such a performance level piece almost at the end of the day, when it doesn't need to be. And that itself is a privilege. I've explained to friends of mine, the fact that you can just run up to the store or to the mall or whatever and pile a messy bun on top of your head and a pair of sweats or your pajama pants, and no one look at you twice or ask you questions.
Or assume you don't belong there.
Yeah, I can go dressed to the nines and still be asked questions, let alone if I just pile my own in some sort of way. And it was a long time before I stopped straightening my hawk, because I've been wearing this for a long while, and I used to straighten it with pressing or flat iron or whatever I could get a hold of, just simply because I was like, well, I go to work, I got to go do this. I better, and I was like, why don't I wear my natural hair? What am I still doing? To try to get in,
that awakening is a whole nother event, right? That awakening is coming into,
And how much did you get back once you did that? You did, how much time were we spending in not being ourselves?
When I first moved to LA, I had natural locks, down my back, and quickly learned, moving from New York, that it's a whole nother landscape. And at that time, this was over 10 years ago, it wasn't as widely acceptable here in LA. And so I had to make a decision. I mean, gratefully, kind of like my cycle of just wanting to cut my locks was aligned, but that did have some impact on that choice, that I cut my locks to kind of assimilate and, because it was a huge difference, huge difference. I went from, having this extensive resume, going place to place to place, trying to find employment, and would have amazing conversations over the phone. But as soon as they saw me, the air went out of the room. And it was a whole nother vibe. The body language was different. And I went through thinking, am I imagining this? Again, am I crazy? And quickly realized, once I cut my hair and did a little straightening job situation, I was like hired for one of the top, I won't say what it was, but it was a top.
It's okay. Well, you actually, this takes me into the next question I was going to ask. And Chef Drummer, I'll ask you this. What is the legacy of tokenism? Why does it happen?
I think the legacy is racism. And, it starts there, and then we move into integration, and that word wildly used, tolerance, right? And then, then there's also the legacy of affirmative action. So I'm going to make you accept some Black and brown people and be a part of your thing. And now that it's we're kind of ripe for that. It's how do I leverage myself, and how do I manipulate a situation for gain for me, to use it, especially, and that's so prevalent in the cannabis industry. I find that we're often shut out, but they want to use our bodies to kind of leverage themselves. Yes. So you get points there. So, I mean, it's a long history of things that we need more hours to delve into.
Yes. I hear racism. And then it was the transition when you talked about the word tolerance and what that created for us, to pushing tolerance. Right. Would you like to add? I feel like you want to add to that, ladies.
Yeah, I do. Anybody? Yeah, I'd love to add to that. Tokenism. It's the other word for slavery. Because it is, when we're tokenized, yes, we're tolerated, but we're also placed into a box of where we can be. Do not step out. Because if you step outside of the box that's been created for you, then you are no longer serving your purpose. So I've always looked at it as another way of enslaving someone's thoughts, mind, body, person, fill in the blanks. Because and I see in the chats, I see people going, it's racist, and it's true. I'm glad people can really see it for what it is. When with all the social unrest and the racial unrest out there right now, and I'm sure you ladies will agree, the amount of phone calls, text messages, and inbox DMs I received because people wanted to be sure that their company was, of course, being PC and making sure that they realized they Black people, and they understood that that racism is wrong. And I just want to let you know, Black Lives Matter. And I go, I have not all nice things to say, because most of those things did not come from a good place. Yeah. You want to put me in a box because you feel like your world is out of control. So as long as you can encapsulate me on your side, saying, oh, of course, this company understands the point of view of Black people because they've reached out to me in an email when we haven't talked for 6 months, is another way of enslaving my mind. And if I allow it to happen, then I'm saying, okay, I'm saying yes to that. Yeah. And those,
again, we're back to personal power again, right? So then how do you call out tokenism? What's the best way for us to call out tokenism? And then how should allies respond when we do it?
I call it out for what it is. I first try to people. I mean, I will gently go over some things over the last months. Things like, I stand against her, help you, educate you in this, but I won't be your fascia. Oh, I try. I want to let everybody else. Is one way that I.
Tiffany, we're losing you a little bit. We didn't really get to hear that. Yeah, I think we lost you. Would you like to take that question, Dr. Bowden?
Sure. Yeah, so I think that this is a really great question, and it's a complicated one in terms of, like, what do we do about it? Because you have to first identify what the situation is, you know, and because I don't think that everybody necessarily has a shared definition of tokenism, sometimes that can create knee-jerk reactions. You can blow up bridges when it's not necessary, you know, and then sometimes there is a time for you know, taking to the streets and marching. Like, let's be clear, there is a distinction. I think that, you know, you first have to know ultimately what it is. And we spent some time on that in the earlier part of the event. The second part of that, I think, is that, you know, we have to constantly understand, as we've expressed, that people are on their mission. So, you know, folks that that invite you into opportunities or whatever, they're always on their mission. It's your responsibility to be on your mission. You know, if you don't know what your mission is, you don't know what your why is, then you're probably going to set yourself up for tokenism, because you're not going to be thinking about your benefit and what's in it for you. Like, if you don't come to the table with those kinds of things in mind, they're not necessarily going to just give it to you, you know? So that's the first thing to really, really, you know, own and understand. And sometimes what happens is that we don't do that part of the equation. And then we find out later about all the benefits that came out of it. And then we're left feeling tokenized, right? Now, there's another aspect of it where we just get, you know, the short end of the stick, where we thought that we understood what the thing is, and we just get blindsided, and you actually get victimized in the situation. That's a completely different situation, and both of those things kind of operate within the same ecosystem. So being able to call out, you know, those kinds of behaviors when there is actual exploitation is important, but doing that in a smart way, and doing that like a general, doing it very strategic. Like, what are you ultimately trying to get out of it? Like, go directly to the individuals that you believe have wronged you first, because they may simply just not be aware, and it could just be a simple ask for balance and reciprocity, and it could be resolved. If that
you first have to know, though, what your goal is, right?
Yeah, you have to know what the goal is. You got to know what the goal is.
For.
Yeah, you have to know what the goal is, and then you have to be able to clearly communicate what that goal is to the other party. And then you need to be reasonable too. You know, it's important to be able to make reasonable requests, and if the person can't meet that request, it's important to understand, okay, well, why is it that they can't, you know, meet that request? Was it reasonable in the first place? So the best thing before you even get into any kind of endeavor is to find out everything that you can about what's going on, and make sure that you're in alignment, and that you have your personal win, and that it's a win-win-win, you know, situation. So best way to do it is to hit it before it starts.
Yeah, I think
Thank you. And then
a key ingredient here is that for as long as we remain the society that we are, we're always going to be tokenized. Right. And so the key ingredient is that white women and white people get involved in dismantling this system.
100%.
That is by far, I think, the main ingredient, because again, we cannot continue to yell into the wind. There has to be substantial allies in this if we want to see our society different. If that's what we want, if we want to dismantle racism, if we want to dismantle this whole look of tokenism, because it's one thing for me to call it out, but again, if I separate myself from this entity and I go over here, I risk the same. We're the same society. So I think
until the system changes, we will always be tokenized.
Exactly.
To it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So let's explore that spectrum of tokenism, inclusion, opportunity, because when we started talking about this event and creating bridges, at first, you know, Lisa and I were talking, and Lisa said this line between tokenism and opportunity. What is it, and how do we as allies know how to write it? And I said, I don't really know that it's a line. I feel like it's more of a Venn diagram, and it's really up to the individual to determine if they're being tokenized and how to navigate that. So some argue that the two should not even be used in the same sentence, right? They shouldn't even be compared.
Yeah.
Is there a legitimate pathway from tokenism to opportunity? Does that exist?
I've had a lot of opportunities. I've had a lot of amazing opportunities that I was very clear that I was being tokenized. And again, as a Black woman, I had to decide, is this something that I want to participate in? And how much of myself am I lending to this thing without compromising my own integrity? So yeah, I think an oppressor would call it an opportunity right off bat and expect me to feel like, thank you.
You're so lucky.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, that's not the end of the statement. That's not the end of the thing. Particularly if I know what I'm walking into and I know what you're doing. At the end of the day, it has to be a symbiotic relationship. And when it becomes, not equal, and you're benefiting far more, how much of myself am I? And that's on every level. That's on a level of from the entrepreneur to the person who's clocking in, doing a 9 to 5, who's doing an honorable job. How much of yourself are you willing to compromise? Some people will compromise it all. What are we willing to give of ourselves?
Very true. Very true. Dr. Bowden?
Yeah,
you over there just like yes.
Yeah, I'm generally in alignment, with Chef Andrea. She says it well. I'm just plus oneing, the things that she's saying, but like just to speak a bit to allies in particular who are interested in this. I think that there's a few things that kind of need to understand is that you're going to make mistakes. Okay, like you have to come into a situation understanding that you don't know everything and have a sense of humility. If you don't have that sense of humility, that's usually the first step to the downfall, presuming that you know everything before you show up and not asking, what's going on. I think that by and large, the things that are presented are token experiences, but as Chef Andrea said, you can, you can make those into opportunities if they are, win-win, kind of situations. I think that for allies, it's also important to always check their intention, not just, the intention in terms of like what they want to create for themselves, but what is it that they are, trying to create for the other party. Then they should also challenge themselves about the kind of impact that they're making. So that first line of impact that they might have might be, oh, we just want to have this person, on a show or have this person at an event. Push yourself and see, is there a bigger impact that you might be able to make to move the needle in whatever it is that you're trying to do, and moving it past what's easy and moving into what is meaningful. That's that next level thing that ultimately people don't usually do, that when people just simply take that step, it makes a very, very big difference. And then also
that's the transition then from tokenism to inclusivity then.
Yes.
When companies take that responsibility. Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's really important to do that. And also to align with the parties that you are co-creating with about, what are the benefits and the impacts that you're trying to create, and what are the solutions? Because sometimes what you have is allies who end up being white saviors, and they don't actually ask the communities that they're trying to engage with about, like, one is what they're trying to even solve for, a problem for that community. Two, if it is a problem for that community, do they have any ideas?
Yes, you have to ask the community. So I want to bring some clarification around that. Let's define white savior, because there is, I'm sure that question will come up. I think I even have it in the questions to ask from the anonymous questions. But what is white savior complex? And it is, as you're defining it, not asking the community you are trying to help. So this idea that you can do something, you can help, but you're not considering the needs of the community or even asking the people, right?
Yeah. So white saviors tend to be kind of tone deaf to what the actual community is up to. They're not really in communication per se. They think of themselves as the one who has the answers, and they're coming in to save a community. So they don't even really necessarily take into consideration their positionality or the experiences of the community that they're serving. And so a lot of times they can create more harm than good. When we think about allies, like a lot of times we just kind of throw everything all in the same bucket, but it's important to understand there's different kinds of allies. There's allies for self-interest. So those are allies who are ultimately, they're just really out to serve themselves, and then they will do what's right so long as it works for them. Then you have allies for altruism, which, these are people who ultimately are doing things just to help the others. It can be kind of like condescending in a way at its premise, but it's like, these people are less fortunate, I'm going to do something for them. But it's like it's kind of like a elitist kind of an approach. And then you have allies for social justice, and these are the ones who are willing to take the reins and help dismantle systems of oppression, all the way up to possibly taking a hit themselves, which might mean hemorrhaging some customers by putting up not only putting up Black Lives Matter statements, but changing your whole processes or whatever, your profit margins might potentially go down, like all types of things that you need to do so that you can actually be active about eradicating systemic racism. Those are, allies for social justice. So a white savior is generally going to be in one of the first two. They're never allied for social justice because they don't really take into consideration the communities that they serve.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
Add to that as a white savior also is tone deaf to the culture of the community that they say they want to serve. In other words, I'm going to come in and gift you with this thing that is of my culture, and with no understanding or care about what your culture is and what you have to offer.
Exactly.
Yeah, being tone deaf is that key component. Okay. So Tiffany Watkins, we were talking about exploring that spectrum of tokenism to opportunity, what it looks like, that Venn diagram. We've had some response even to this event where some felt they don't go together. I myself feel I share Chef Drummer's view in that, I knew I was being tokenized, but I got an opportunity. I knew I was the token, and I pounced on it with that power.
Right.
So yes, please.
And I did get to hear a fair amount what the ladies had to say, and I wholeheartedly agree. It's really about what you do with the opportunity. Let me step back. It's actually what you do with the situation to create an opportunity for yourself and pull it out of tokenism for you. Because ultimately we all know that we can't change other people, but we can change ourselves, our point of view personally. So if you're met with a situation where you're being tokenized, that's the reason you've been asked to come to the table. Do the best that you can for yourself and without challenging your integrity. Know your boundary of when enough is enough, and that itself is empowering. Understanding.
How can employers know or allies know when they are tokenizing? Because let's give the benefit of the doubt. Let's assume they think, like when they're in the white savior state of mind, I'm assuming they don't know they're in that state of mind, right? So for people watching today, how can they know that they're tokenizing?
And that is a very fine line, because there is something that is a term that my mother used to tell me when I was younger. There's a thing called benign racism. And white savior falls right in that. Oftentimes the misguided, the misinformed white savior character is gifting to you based off of stereotype. They believe in their heart of hearts, well, this is what you need. You're a Black person, and I'm going to save you from this horrible life of being Black by giving you what I know to be your plight.
Right.
And so without necessary education on their end, they're going to stay in that zone, giving, wanting to give, but based off of little to no knowledge of who you are, what you represent, right? And so I can see where the line gets muddled between I really want to help and I'm going to give you what I'm giving you because this is what I think you deserve and this is what makes me look diverse.
Right. There's that altruism. Yeah.
Yeah, in my mind, I'm exploring this languaging of opportunity versus tokenism, and is it, and I don't know the exact answer now, but I think perhaps we should relanguage, like versus an opportunity, like I'm giving you this thing and you should feel grateful for, my gifting. It should be a shared experience. You have something to bring. Right. Listen, I was me before you called me. And that's right.
Opportunity is in the bucket. The opportunities are out there. We say, oh, there's an opportunity to do this, that, or the other. The opportunities are in the bucket. The equality comes in us all being able to put our hands in that bucket and nobody's checking us for skin color.
And it's a shared, it's a shared experience versus I'm going to, how do you give the doctor an opportunity when she is educated, she is brilliant, she has ideas, she comes to the table with something. So if anything, it's you are both giving you're both having a shared experience. You both have an opportunity here to build, to grow something and to become and change the landscape of something that is the hope. So I don't know. I'm challenging my consideration even on the languaging because I often say myself, I want to give young people that look like me
an opportunity
in this.
Yes.
Where it's a shared experience.
Yeah, the internal speak of opportunity when it comes to us, we're enlightening our own people that there are opportunities out there. Do not be blind to those based off of what we hear in society. I think that language is fine internally, but I agree with you on the proper external language because you are who you are based off of anyone giving you or not giving you anything. You built your own empire. You don't really need someone else to go, oh, well, hey, Andrea, there's an opportunity over here. Let me pair you with it. You're like, I'm already seeing that and I'm past it. Or I'll get there when I get there. But internally, and which is a conversation at another time, obviously, but internally, I think our people know that opportunity is out there. And here's the pathway to not be bombarded with racism or bombarded with being tokenized or bombarded with not being accepted at the table. So we can talk about that amongst ourselves, but you're right. The external speech really needs to have a different twist on it.
Well, thank you for that.
And I think, I think amongst ourselves too, I see you, Dr. Bowden. I think amongst ourselves too, we need to be teaching each other and mentoring on like, this is how you navigate this space. But go ahead, Dr. Bowden. I saw you in there.
No, I was just going to say this reminds me of like some of the advice I give some of my mentees is, when they're considering, business decisions, I was just like, well, think about it as if it were a dating, situation. Like, you wouldn't have, a gentleman come up to you and be like, I want to give you an opportunity to date me. No, I have an opportunity to, try it on like that. Let that hit a little different. It's more of a collaboration.
That whole language.
Yeah. It's a collaboration. It's like I am full and I am complete, sound perfect by myself. And I am also giving you an opportunity to co-create with me because I have my own light. I have my own power. I have my own thing going. And it was here before you. It will be here after you. I am divine. All of this. Okay. So like this
collaboration.
Yes, collaboration. I don't care who it is. I don't care if Procter & Gamble is coming trying to like offer multi-million dollars. Oh, you want an opportunity? We're going to do a collaboration. Like, I don't care, what on paper it looks like, because my worth is not measured by USD. That's not what it looks like. So I think that we have to like really adjust that in our minds, hold that in every conversation, business, personal, whatever, or else you end up in these weird codependent relationships, whether that's business or pleasure. We have to always own our greatness.
Yes. There's the clapping sound again. Man, you know, we talked about so many things. I want to respect the schedule, and I want to give these women in the group an opportunity to ask their questions direct. I do have some that were submitted ahead of time that were anonymous that we can go through, but let's transition. Let's transition into the sessions. That means we're all gonna click on sessions on the left and join each other in a breakout room. And ladies watching there, you can type your chat in the question. If you would like to come on camera and ask it yourself, you are able. Yes, we need to bring the sound effects next time, Wendy. We'll do that. You are able to request your camera to come on so you can be on screen with us in the session and really talk directly to the ladies, ask your question, and then ask any follow-up questions you might after they answer. Please type your question in the chat box, do an @ if it's for a specific panelist, and let's go on over to the sessions room.